Dr. Landau, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Before we delve into this very, very tricky subject, let's take a look at the following report.
United Nations inspectors visited a controversial heavy water production facility in Iran on Sunday that could yield fuel for a nuclear bomb. It was the first time in more than 2 years that the International Atomic Energy Agency had been allowed to go to the Arak facility, which is designed to supply a reactor under construction nearby. The increased transparency is the result of a thaw in relations between Iran and the West that culminated in a deal struck last month, under which Tehran is to curb its nuclear program in return for some easing of sanctions. Iran's heavy water work is a big concern for the West because it could afford the country with a second pathway towards producing a nuclear weapon. U.S. officials have said that Washington might press Iran to dismantle part of the unfinished reactor, but Iran reiterated on Sunday that it would not entertain such demand. The visit by inspectors came one day after Iran's atomic agency announced the country was moving ahead with testing on a new generation of more sophisticated uranium enrichment centrifuges.
But Dr. Landau, I mean, here it begins. Inspectors are in a nuclear plant. Sign of good faith? Progress?
I think the more important report over the past 2 days regards the new generation centrifuges rather than Arak. It's true they have not allowed inspectors in for 2 years. The last visit was in 2011 and before that only in 2005. However, I mean, this is a report of what they are allowing. What they have not allowed is a visit to Parchin, which is what has been on the agenda of the IAEA for 2 years.
The interim deal?
No, there is no mention. Well, you know what? It's actually interesting because just after the interim deal was agreed upon, and by the way, there are serious questions whether that interim deal has actually been finalized. This is another of the question marks surrounding this whole issue. Yes,
so?
There are reports that it has not actually been signed and therefore is not yet,
in motion.
In motion.
So what were all the press ops and the wavy hands and the smiles?
Look, there are a lot of issues that are fuzzy and not clear with regard to this interim deal. That's one of them. But going back to Parchin, there were 2 versions of what was agreed upon that came out, within 24 hours. There was the White House fact sheet, and there was the version that was released by the Iranian Foreign Ministry. They were not identical, and one of the issues where there was a difference was in the White House fact sheet. There was mention of Parchin that would have to be dealt with in the context of a comprehensive deal, and in the Iranian, there was no mention of that. But we know that this has been on the agenda for 2 years. Since the IAEA report of November 2011, the IAEA has been pressing to get to Parchin. At least 8 times they have come to Iran with the understanding that they would be allowed to inspect Parchin, and thereafter were refused entrance. So Parchin has been so, much on the agenda of IAEA. Suddenly, Parchin is not there, and the facility that the IAEA is allowed entry to is Arak, which, yes, it's a concern, but inspectors were there 2 years ago, and it's not an immediate major concern in the manner that Parchin is. But going back to the centrifuges, suddenly there's an announcement from the Iranians that they are continuing testing these centrifuges. Now, it's not directly in contradiction to the interim deal, because there it says they're not allowed to install any more of these centrifuges and not allowed to operate them. One of the questions that I have been, talking about since the interim deal was made is what about testing? And this is the first time we heard something about testing. And indeed, the Iranians are interpreting this as, okay, we're not installing, we're not operating, but we're testing, which is exactly what they need to be doing at this time. Where is the international reaction to this? Again, a big question mark here.
And to us people who don't understand this, when they say they're testing the centrifuges, what is the process of that can lead to? What are the steps of that?
Well, basically, first you have your research and development, you develop these new centrifuges, then you have to test them, obviously, as the step before you actually operate them. We know from the latest IAEA reports that about 1,000 of these centrifuges have been installed at Natanz, and they have been ready for testing. In other words, testing was the next stage that the Iranians needed to do at this time. And now we hear reports, yes, they're testing. So how does this fit with the interim deal, which is supposed to freeze the program, which is supposed to not enable Iran to advance its program at the time when they're supposed to be talking? It doesn't seem to go together. But what is most curious about all of this is that we're not hearing any international outrage to these developments. No talk about Parchin that I just mentioned. No talk about the fact that they are testing. Again, it's not in direct contradiction to the interim agreement, but it is indeed in contradiction to the spirit of the agreement and to this issue of acting in good faith. This cannot be interpreted as good faith on the part of the Iranians. Why is the international community not expressing outrage?
Completely, completely so. In that respect, there wasn't the first. They did mention Iraq and the fact that they're letting first, entrance to Iraq. Can that help, though, in that respect, to pave the way to other things, or is it all a matter of interpretation? And we're going to see this back and forth.
I think what we're seeing now is a pattern that has been well established over the past 10 years, which is Iran will cooperate on those aspects of its program that are less problematic for it to cooperate on. But it's not cooperating on the aspects that are most troubling to the international community. Again, at this particular juncture, we're talking about Parchin and this issue of the advanced centrifuges that they announced so, openly that they are testing and readying them for operation. Why would Iran be announcing that and doing that if they really meant to roll back their nuclear program and move towards a comprehensive deal? Why this announcement? Why this kind of, defiant step? International community is not reacting, partly because they have this agreement and it's not in direct contradiction. Not in direct.
President Obama did say yesterday, I think, that the chances for a deal is 50-50, which may be,
What President Obama needs to define is what are the exact conditions for defining this as a failure.
Dr. Landau, thank you so much for being with us.